For years, us ADC mains have had it rough. 0-6 assassins have been one-shotting us after missing every ability for far too long. And since when did Riot make GP an assassin? It's fair to say that ADC has been one of the least fun roles to play for quite some time now. I'm sure you're all aware of the changes that Riot recently introduced that make playing ADC a lot more bearable. Here's a huge list of the changes, and as you can see, nearly every champion has been changed in some way and everyone is tankier. There's less damage in the game, which means less Qiyana's running around the map killing you before you can press any buttons. However, there's even more button pressing that you can be doing that you probably aren't even aware of. High-level ADCs have figured out how to abuse the new changes to climb. Speaking of high-level ADCs, you're listening to one right now. Hi guys, I'm Prismal, a new content creator for Skillcapped. I'm a former professional player, I've been challenger for multiple seasons, and recently hit 1400 LP, and I also got top 10 on the solo queue ladder. In order to hit top 10 in fact, I climbed from hardstuck 380 LP to 1400 in little over a week, so it's safe to say I know a lot about climbing. I'm here to help you guys out with everything ADC, so... But before we get into it, be sure to check out Skillcapped if you want to truly get better at League of Legends. We're the only service that offers a money-back guarantee if you don't climb at least 5 divisions while actively using our service. We do this because our service really does work, and if it doesn't work for you, you shouldn't pay. Learn more at the end of this video or click the link in the description below. And so with that being said, let's jump back into today's guide. For starters, the durability patch that Riot released has toned down a lot of the unfair champions like Qiyana and Zed instantly killing you from full HP.
Where's my damage? Riot! Where is it?
While this may suck for the 20 elo inflated Qiyana one-tricks out there, this is way better for all of us normal people. These changes give you a lot more time to do damage, and so DPS champions like Marksman are a lot more effective now. Look at how I just tanked an entire Fiddle and Senna ult and lived. This would never have happened before the changes. On top of this, towers in the game do more damage, and therefore tower diving is less frequent and way more punishing than it was before. Less damage in the game means assassins and early game junglers like Lee Sin are a lot worse. They don't scale well and they rely on snowballing or ganking to get ahead, and this playstyle is just way harder now because you can't just press one button and make 300 gold. If we put all of these things together, you get the idea. ADC is in a super good spot right now. The most notable ADCs that have been on the rise lately are scaling ADCs. We'll go over the runes, builds, and champions that fit into this category later, but for all of you ADCs that love farming up a storm and carrying teamfights, this is for you. Also, for you aggressive ADCs out there that love stomping lane, we've got you covered on how to abuse these changes for your LP too. If you've played this game for a long time, you remember the reign that ADCs had during the Ardent Sensor meta. You should be feeling the same amount of agency that you did back then. To start off, let's talk about scaling ADCs. These champions benefited from this patch the most by far for a number of reasons. As I already mentioned above, everyone in the game does less damage now. However, ADCs already had a ton of damage late game before this. This basically means that everyone else is nerfed except us. Also, we feel way stronger when we hit our one-item spikes now compared to before. I'll expand on this later, but we don't have to AFK farm for 30 minutes before we're remotely useful anymore. Finally, and most importantly, we can still play the game even if our support sucks. Tower dives are a lot more difficult now, so as long as we play well, our support can be 0-15 and we'll still win. Now, this sounds like ADC is a walk in the park, and believe me, it is. But there's a few things you need to learn before you can go out there and start 1v9ing every game. We'll go over this later in a lot more detail, I promise, but certain changes like sustain being nerfed makes trading a lot more impactful in lane. This, coupled with enchanters being better, makes having good trades super important. You don't have to be Gumayushi, but you do need to learn a few bread and butter trade patterns for some of the best champs. Let's go over a few clips of me and Platinum Elo demonstrating how these trades work. Kog'Maw excels at super long trades where you can fully proc your lethal tempo during your W. A great time for this is right after the enemy crashes a wave into you. Here we see Ezreal and Sona sticking around as their wave dies near my tower. I ended up taking full advantage of this and I start peppering them with my autos. This ends up completely turning around the lane, even though the start of the trade looks losing. Now Vayne, on the other hand, is great at using her tumble to quickly chip away at her opponent's HP bar when they try to go for CS. The general idea is that you want to hover right outside of your opponent's auto attack range, so that when they do decide to auto attack a minion, you can quickly tumble in, auto attack them, and walk away before their animation finishes. This clip demonstrates this perfectly, and doing well is sure to help you win lane. Now you get the idea. You should primarily be sticking to your bread and butter combos on any scaling ADC you play, like the auto E auto on Varus for example, or Ashe's auto W auto. These are just a few examples, but the main point is that you should always be playing to your champion's strengths. Okay, so we got the trades down. You might be thinking, why does any of this matter? Won't my Blitzcrank still AFK behind me in lane? And I can't exactly trade when the enemy Nautilus is in my face 24/7, turning on his OBS so he can record the 1 in 15 million hook he's about to land on me through my... Sorry, I had a bad weekend. Anyways, as I was about to get into, scaling ADCs are awesome now because enchanters are insanely popular. They're some of the highest win and pick rate supports currently. This works both ways for us. An enchanter on our team means more survivability if the enemy team tries to gank us or dive us, and an enchanter on the enemy team means we're way less likely to get ganked or dove in the first place. This essentially means that we can scale out of lane for free a lot easier than we could before. And I know what might be going through your head right now. Okay, Prismal, I see how I might be able to abuse champs like Kog'Maw and Vayne for elo, but aren't they like kinda boring? They take forever to get going, and I pretty much just have to hope my team doesn't int before I get to 3 items. Well, not exactly. I briefly touched on this earlier, but these scaling lethal tempo ADCs like Kog'Maw and Vayne all spike super hard on one item, and their core items are a lot cheaper than champions like Aphelios. Blade of the Ruin King and Ginsu's are not only cheaper than mythics like Gale Force or Kraken, but you don't have to wait for 3 items to start pumping damage. Not to mention, getting your items is way easier now because of the changes. Less damage in the game means it's harder to die in lane, so it's easier to make it to those item breakpoints. One last cheat code for you. Rune pages. So many times I've looked at my friends' OPGGs lately, and I've noticed that they're not going the correct runes. You really want to be maximizing on the scaling now that lanes are a lot more free and you have time to ramp up. Again, because of the lower importance on early game and how most games should be going later now. A default rune page that you can run on any of these champions is Lethal Tempo, Presence of Mind, or Triumph, up to your personal preference, Alacrity, Last Stand, Overgrowth, and Conditioning. This is pretty much your staple rune page, and you should be running it on almost every Lethal Tempo ADC. There's a few variants you can consider, like still going Gathering Storm Absolute Focus on champions like Jinx that benefit from the extra AD. Another thing you can do is opt into Unflinching instead of Overgrowth if you're against a ton of CC. Scaling ADCs got a lot of love for the recent changes. Now, this doesn't mean that you can't still play other champions. In fact, aggressive ADCs are still in a great spot, and you definitely can abuse them for LP if you're good at them. Aggressive ADCs are great at snowballing, and despite scaling being better overall, it's actually even easier to snowball now than it was before. With lifesteal and overall lane sustain nerfed, it's easier to stay winning once you start winning lane. You're definitely a lot more reliant on snowballing now than you were previously though, as throws make it easier for your opponents to outscale you. However, in general, it's almost guaranteed now if you consider yourself a proficient ADC. There are 2 main ways of snowballing I consider when I think of laning as an AD carry. You're either pushing your opponents in permanently and pressuring them every wave until they're forced to take a bad recall, or you're drawing pressure to your lane and bringing the enemy jungle bot lane and wasting their time. Pushing your opponents in after taking a good trade is so much more consistent to maintain now that sustain is nerfed. If you take a good trade, you're more likely to keep taking good trades and your opponents are less likely to be able to heal it all back up. Once you end up taking a good trade, you'll feel the effects of it for a lot longer. Remember this Kog'Maw clip that we showed earlier? Well, this isn't necessarily an aggressive ADC, but this sequence highlights the concept really well. Ezreal and Sona were just previously pressuring me and pushing me under tower. However, this one good trade essentially allowed me to take complete control back of the lane. Let's take a look at the next minute of the lane phase. As you can see, because sustain is nerfed, Sona's heal is essentially irrelevant, and they're out of potions, which means their chances of regaining HP is pretty much non-existent. I was able to stack a big wave into them and get my Zerker's recall, which is a really good spot to be in. However, it ended up turning into a pretty messy fight that I ended up not playing the best. The result ended up being a 1-for-1, but we crashed the wave into their tower, and the play was a net positive for our team. All of this stemmed from the initial trade that I took on Sona when the wave was at my tower. Her and Ezreal were basically stuck in the condition that they were in from that one trade for the next minute. I know drawing pressure to your lane might seem scary, but there's more room for error now that the overall damage in the game is lower. Since there's less fed assassins running around and more farming junglers, the chances of you getting ganked in general is just way lower. Even if you do get ganked, you'll probably end up surviving with 10 or 20% HP instead of getting one shot like on previous patches. Utilizing this to our advantage means essentially 2v3ing to get a lead. Here's a clip of me essentially winning the game in one singular play. I'm pretty proud of this one. I'm pushing up to the enemy tower on Lucian and completely dominating the lane. I noticed that the enemy top laner is in bot river for a skirmish, and there could potentially be 5 people heading bottom. However, after quickly panning my camera, I realized that Seraphine is headed back to the mid lane. Now is the time to really push my limits and abuse the extent of the damage changes. I'm feeling pretty much invincible, and I know that if I can bring almost the entire enemy team down here and survive the gank, the game is won. I start by hitting the tower to bait the enemy team to come down to gank me. Notice my HP bar. If this was the previous patch, I would be totally dead with no chance of outplaying this. Being tankier and them doing less damage literally won me the entire game. I'll admit, I played this one really clean, but if they did even 5% more damage, I would be a goner before I even hit record. I ended up doing this with a Gale Force on Lucian, but obviously this works with every ADC once you hit your power spike. The way you play each situation might look different, and the key takeaway here is to remember to always play to your champion's strengths. The big idea is that plays like this work, and them being even easier now means you shouldn't be scared to attempt plays like these to abuse the changes and push your leads even further than before. Alright, so here's everything we covered today. The durability changes are massive, and ADCs in general are a big fan of them. Assassins are pretty much dead, That is, until Riot decides to take away our fun and buff them for the 50th time. Towers do way more damage to keep you safer from dives. Damage is lower, sustain is lower, and our sanity is hopefully a lot higher now that ADC is playable again. Scaling ADCs are the biggest fans of the changes, as they can pretty much get out of lane scot-free as long as we know what we're doing. Remember the bread and butter trade patterns, and make sure that we're taking the right runes and building the right items to scale. Lethal tempo and attack speed items are your best friends. On the flip side, aggressive ADCs are in a better spot now too. If you like winning lane, you'll be able to win lane a lot easier with the sustain nerfs and survive ganks a lot easier too with the damage nerfs. Not to mention, ganks happen a lot less frequently due to farming junglers being better with these changes. All in all, you should be excited to play ADC again. Rejoice in the fact that we're no longer playing the worst role in the game, and get out there and smurf on everyone with your newfound ADC knowledge. Let's get you that LP. Alright guys, before we wrap this up, let's talk a little bit more about skill count. So we offer a 5-division rank up guarantee and think that's a pretty crazy thing to offer. It's like your gym membership guaranteeing you'll get ripped. Your local gym would go bust if they offered that, right? Well, not us. We've offered this for years because our service really does work. And it works so well in fact that we're able to produce by far the largest catalog of premium league guides on the internet. We add over 20 videos a week with over 1,600 guides curated into over 100 courses no one can compare. We've also sent challenger players into ELO Hell 714 times and counting, where they commentate how to carry live. They also respond to all questions asked. Sign up today for as little as $6.99 a month if you're serious about improving. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.